Michael Gove has approved the first new UK coal mine in 30 years despite concern about its climate impacts among Conservative MPs and experts. The proposed mine in Cumbria would dig up coking coal for steel production in the UK across the world. Critics say the mine would undermine climate targets and demand for coking coal is declining. But supporters claim the mine, near Whitehaven, will create jobs and reduce the need to import coal. The fate of the West Cumbria mining project had been hanging in the balance for 2 years after the local county council initially approved the mine in 2020. The government's Advisory Climate Change Committee pointed out that 85% of the coal produced by the mine would be exported. European market. Lord Debon, chairman of the CCC, branded the proposal absolutely indefensible and said its approval would damage the UK's leadership on climate change. Planning authorities reviewed the original decision and sent a report to the Secretary of State of Communities to review and make a final judgment. The letter says Mr. Gove was satisfied that there is currently a UK and European market for the coal. The Secretary of State agrees with the assessment that the effects of the development on carbon emissions would be relatively neutral and not significant, the letter says. The Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities said the decision was consistent with the government's policies on curbing carbon emissions. But opposition parties and environmental groups condemned the decision as harmful for the climate and the UK's transition to a greener economy. Friends of the Earth said the decision was a misguided and deeply damaging mistake that flies in the face of all the evidence. The mine isn't needed, will add to global climate emissions, and won't replace Russian coal, said Friends of the Earth campaigner Tony Bosworth. Coal is the dirtiest of all fossil fuels, producing almost twice the emissions of natural gas. West Cumbria Mining says the coking coal it produces will be used for steelmaking in the UK and Europe. The local council had granted permission to dig for coking coal until 2049, with the mine expected to create about 500 jobs. Steel industry expert Chris McDonald estimates that, at best, they will use less than 10% of the output of the mine and, by the mid-2030s, none at all. That means the new mine will export virtually all the coal it produces. Labour's Shadow Climate Secretary Ed Miliband said the mine was no solution to the energy crisis and does not offer secure, long-term jobs. The Green Party suggested the decision had been cynically delayed until after the UK's presidency of COP ended and had left the government's environmental credentials in tatters. The decision could expose divisions within the Conservative Party, whose Greener MPs have spoken out against the plans. But some Northern Tory MPs had campaigned for the mine on the basis it would provide jobs and investment. In a tweet, former Conservative Party Chairman Jake Berry said the decision was good news for the North and for common sense. Critics argue burning more coal is the antithesis of such plans to boost green energy sources. Supporters of the mine say it would support the government's pledge to level up and reduce regional inequality. The mine has also divided opinion in Cumbria, with some in favor of the jobs it would bring. Chris Whiteside, a local Conservative councillor, welcomed the decision, saying that UK coking coal was less damaging to the planet than importing coal from USA or Russia. Sundance 2023. Anne Hathaway, Chiwetel Ejiofor and Julia Louis-Dreyfus lead lineup. Next month's Sundance Film Festival will see a return to in-person premieres, with new films featuring Anne Hathaway, Chiwetel Ejiofor and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. The Utah-based festival has been online only since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and while this year's was set to be a physical-digital hybrid, the rise of the Omicron variant meant that it was canceled at the last minute. There will still be a digital component to 2023's edition, but a large number of films will only be available to watch on the ground. The Lady Macbeth director William Oldroyd will unveil his much-anticipated follow-up, the psychological thriller Eileen. Set in the 1960s, it stars Thomasin McKenzie as a secretary who develops a friendship with a glamorous new counselor at the prison where she works, played by Anne Hathaway. But things take a dark turn when a secret is revealed. It's based on the highly acclaimed book by Ottessa Moshfegh, which was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize. Oscar nominee Chiwetel Ejiofor will also head to the mountains with the sci-fi comedy The Pod Generation, which sees him and Emilia Clarke star as a couple using technology to start a family with an artificial womb. Nicole Holofcener, whose 2006 film Friends with Money opened the festival that year, will return with You Hurt My Feelings, a comedy that reteams her with Enough Said's Julia Louis-Dreyfus. The Veep star will play a novelist whose life is thrown into disarray when she overhears her husband criticizing her writing. An adaptation of Kristen Rupinian's viral short story Cat Person will also premiere, starring Coda's Emilia Jones and Succession's Nicholas Braun. "They've kind of turned it into a thriller," Jones said in an interview last year. Brandon Cronenberg will also return to the festival after 2020's Possessor, with the gory resort-set horror Infinity Pool starring Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth. The Thoroughbreds director Corey Finley will premiere his new film Landscape with Invisible Hand starring Tiffany Haddish about a future in which aliens take over and control the world's economy. Films in competition include bodybuilding drama Magazine Dream starring Jonathan Majors, Sometimes I Think About Dying starring Daisy Ridley as a suicidal office worker, and relationship thriller Fair Play led by Bridgerton's Phoebe Dynevor. The festival will also see a large selection of major documentaries premiere. There will also be documentaries focused on figures, including Little Richard, Michael J. Fox, Judy Blume, and Brooke Shields. This year will see 101 films premiere, with 53% of them directed by one or more filmmakers who identify as women and 45% from filmmakers of color. Maintaining an essential place for artists to express themselves, take risks, and for visionary stories to endure and entertain is distinctly Sundance, said Robert Redford, the founder and president of the Sundance Institute. The festival continues to foster these values and connections through independent storytelling. We are honored to share the compelling selection of work at this year's festival from distinct perspectives and unique voices. The Sundance Film Festival will take place on 19 to 29 January.
S&P, NASDAQ extend losing streaks amid rising recession worries. For the benchmark S&P 500, it was the fifth straight session that it has declined, while the NASDAQ finished down for the fourth time in a row. The Dow snapped a two-session losing streak, as it ended unchanged from the previous day. The Nasdaq was dragged down by a 1.4% drop in Apple Inc. on Morgan Stanley's iPhone shipment target cut and a 3.2% fall in Tesla Inc. over production loss worries. Markets have also been rattled by downbeat comments from top executives at Goldman Sachs Group Inc., J.P. Morgan Chase & Co. and Bank of America Corp. On Tuesday that a mild to more pronounced recession was likely ahead. Fears that the U.S. central bank might stick to a longer rate hike cycle have intensified recently in the wake of strong jobs and service sector reports. More economic data, including weekly jobless claims, producer price index, and the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Survey this week, will be on the watch list for clues on what to expect from the Fed on December 14. It feels like we're in this very uncertain period where investors are trying to ascertain what's more important, as policymakers are slowing down on rates but the data is not playing ball, said Craig Erlam, senior market analyst at OANDA. The market is trying to balance the headwinds and the tailwinds, and this is causing some confusion. The CBOE Volatility Index, also known as Wall Street's Fear Gauge, closed at 22.68, its highest finish since November 18. Money market participants see a 91% chance that the Fed will increase its key benchmark rate by 50 basis points in December to 4.25% to 4.50%, with rates peaking in May 2023 at 4.93%. The S&P 500 lost 7.34 points, or 0.19%, to close at 3,933.92, and the Nasdaq Composite dropped 56.34 points, or 0.51%, to finish at 10,958.55. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was flat, ending on 33,597.92. Concerns about a steep rise in borrowing costs have boosted the dollar. The S&P 500 is on track to snap a 3-year winning streak. 3 of the 11 major S&P sector indexes were higher, with healthcare one of them. Technology and communication services, down 0.5 and 0.9% respectively, were the worst performers. Energy fell for its 5th straight session. Carvana Co. had its worst day as a public company, losing nearly half its stock value, after Wedbush downgraded the used car retailer's stock to underperform from neutral, and slashed its price target to $1. Meanwhile, United Airlines traded 4.1% lower. Unions representing various workers at the airline said they would join forces on contract negotiations. Travel-related stocks were generally down. Delta Airlines and American Airlines Group were 4.4% and 5.4% lower respectively, with cruise line operators Carnival Corp and Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings and accommodation-linked Airbnb Inc. and Booking Holdings all falling between 1.7% and 4.4%. Volume on U.S. exchanges was 10.29 billion shares, compared with the 10.98 billion average for the full session over the last 20 trading days. The S&P 500 posted 7 new 52-week highs and 7 new lows. The Nasdaq Composite recorded 61 new highs and 307 new lows.